When I was little, I thought my brother, Ethan, was the closest thing to a superhero I'd ever know. He was 2 years older than me, and from as far back as I could remember, he carried himself like he was my shield against the world. If I tripped on the playground, he was the one to pull me back up before anyone else even noticed. If kids at school laughed at me for wearing hand-me-down shoes, he'd step right in, throw his arm over my shoulder, and say something like, "You're just jealous because my sister is cooler than all of you." Growing up in our small town in Ohio, it felt like Ethan was my safe place. Our parents worked long hours, mom juggling double shifts as a nurse, dad working construction jobs that kept him out late, so a lot of the time, it was just me and Ethan. He made it fun. He'd sneak snacks from the pantry and call it a midnight feast, or he'd tell me stories about how one day, we'd move out together and live in a huge house with no rules, just freedom. I believed him. I believed every word. To the outside world, Ethan was this charming, dependable guy. Teachers loved him, neighbors trusted him, and even my friends would whisper about how lucky I was to have an older brother like him. And I felt lucky, at least at first. But there were small cracks I didn't understand then, things I brushed aside because I wanted to keep believing in the image I had of him. Like how sometimes he'd come home late with this restless energy, his voice too sharp, his movements jittery. Or how when our parents asked him questions about school or his friends, he'd deflect with a joke, and everyone would laugh. Everyone except me. I noticed the way his eyes would flicker, like he was carrying something heavy he didn't want us to see. Still, I told myself it was nothing. He was Ethan, the brother who told me bedtime stories, the one who walked me to school when no one else could, the one who promised me that no matter what, he'd always protect me. I remember one afternoon when I was about 12 and Ethan was 14. A group of older kids started picking on me at the park. They mocked my braces and called me names that stung more than I wanted to admit. Before I could even think of what to do, Ethan stormed over, his jaw tight and his fists clenched. "Say that again," he dared them. The boys backed down, muttering under their breaths as they left. But Ethan didn't stop glaring until they were completely out of sight. Then he turned to me, softened instantly, and said, "Don't listen to them, Allie. You've got me. You'll always have me." It was moments like that when I felt safe, when I thought, yeah, he really is my hero. But heroes don't keep secrets, at least not the kind Ethan did. I didn't know it yet, but around that same time, Ethan was beginning to weave a web of lies. Lies to our parents, to his friends, and even to me. Lies that would eventually twist their way into every part of our lives until nothing felt safe anymore. The first hint came this summer before Ethan started high school. We were sitting on the porch steps, eating popsicles, watching the sun sink behind the trees. I asked him if he was excited for high school, expecting him to talk about football games or meeting new people. Instead, he went quiet. "High school's different," he said finally, like he already knew something I didn't. "Don't trust everyone there, okay? People will act like your friend, but they're not." I laughed it off, telling him I'd be fine when it was my turn. But the way he looked at me, serious, almost scared, stuck with me. I didn't realize then that Ethan was already in deeper trouble than I could imagine. Trouble that had nothing to do with high school cliques or fitting in. Trouble that would eventually drag me down with him. At the time, all I saw was the brother who walked me home when I was scared. The one who promised he'd always take the blame if I ever messed up. I saw the good in him because I wanted to. Because admitting there might be more beneath the surface felt impossible. I thought Ethan was my shield. I didn't know yet that sometimes the person who claims to protect you is the very person holding the knife behind their back. And the day I found out the truth, the day his secrets finally came to light, was the day everything I believed about my family, my childhood, and even myself, shattered. But before I could understand that, before the betrayal ripped everything apart, I still lived in that fragile bubble of trust, blind to the storm that was slowly building around me. And Ethan? He played his part perfectly. Because that's what he was best at, pretending. Freshman year changed Ethan in ways I didn't understand at the time. He used to come home eager to tell me stories about his day, about the funny things his teachers said, or how his friends cracked him up at lunch. But once high school started, it was like he'd built this invisible wall between us. He'd walk in late some nights, the smell of smoke clinging to his hoodie, his eyes glassy like he hadn't slept in days. I asked him once if he was okay, and he laughed it off, ruffling my hair the way he always did. "I'm fine, Allie. Don't worry about me. I've got it under control." But what was it? That was the question that kept gnawing at me. I wanted to believe him, but the Ethan who used to sit on the porch with me, laughing about popsicles and dreams of the future, was fading. In his place was someone sharper, quicker to snap, someone who spent hours locked away in his room with the music blasting so loud I could hear the bass shaking the walls. Mom noticed, too. She'd whisper to Dad at night when they thought I was asleep. "He's pulling away. Something's going on with him." But Dad always brushed it off. "It's just teenage stuff. He'll grow out of it." But deep down, I knew better. The first time I truly realized something was wrong was a Saturday morning when I was supposed to be at soccer practice. Ethan offered to walk me since Mom was working and Dad had an early job site. I remember skipping down the street, chattering about how I hoped I'd make the starting lineup, when I realized Ethan wasn't beside me anymore. I turned back and found him leaning against a lamppost, talking quietly with a group of older boys I'd never seen before. They didn't look like kids from our neighborhood. Their clothes were rougher, their faces harder, and the way they kept scanning the street made my stomach twist. Ethan shoved something into his pocket before jogging back to me. "Who were they?" I asked. "Friends," he said quickly, too quickly. "Don't worry about it, Allie. Just focus on your game." But I couldn't stop worrying. Because when he said it, his eyes didn't meet mine. That night, I overheard him arguing with Mom. She'd found crumpled bills and coins scattered across his dresser, more money than a 14-year-old should have. She demanded to know where it came from, but Ethan just muttered that he'd been doing odd jobs for neighbors. He was good at lying, too good. Mom wanted to believe him, but I saw the doubt etched into her face. Still, she let it go, probably because she was exhausted from working back-to-back shifts at the hospital. But I didn't let it go. I started watching Ethan more closely. I noticed how he'd disappear after dinner, slipping out with his phone buzzing in his pocket. I noticed how he stopped inviting me to hang out with him, stopped being the brother who told me everything. One night, I made the mistake of following him. He told Mom he was going to the library to study. I knew that was a lie. Ethan hadn't touched a textbook in weeks. So I waited a few minutes, then slipped on my sneakers and trailed him down the block. He cut across the basketball courts, past the gas station, until he stopped behind the old convenience store on the edge of town. There, waiting for him, was the same group of older boys I'd seen before. My heart hammered in my chest as I crouched behind a dumpster, straining to hear. "Got the stuff?" one of them asked. Ethan pulled something from his backpack, a small baggie I couldn't quite see, but I knew instantly it wasn't good. They exchanged words, a handshake, cash. My stomach dropped. I wanted to run to him, to scream at him to stop, but I froze. My big brother, my protector, was standing in the shadows, dealing with people who made me feel sick just looking at them. When he finally walked home, whistling like nothing had happened, I slipped back inside through the kitchen door, my hands trembling. I couldn't tell Mom and Dad. I didn't even know how to explain what I'd seen. Part of me didn't want to believe it was real. That night, Ethan knocked softly on my door. "You still awake, Allie?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Yeah." He poked his head in, smiling that same easy smile he'd always used to reassure me. "Just wanted to say goodnight." I nodded, pulling the covers up to my chin. He stepped inside, ruffling my hair like always. "You know I'd never let anything happen to you, right? You're my little sister. You've got me, always." His words should have comforted me. But instead, they made me want to cry. Because now, every time he said he was protecting me, all I could think about was what he was hiding and how dangerous it felt. That was the first crack in the armor. The moment I realized Ethan wasn't just drifting away from me, he was dragging us both into something I couldn't control. And it was only the beginning. By the time I turned 13 and Ethan was 15, the distance between us felt like a canyon I couldn't cross anymore. He still played the part of the protective brother when our parents were watching, helping me with chores, asking about my grades, pretending he cared about my soccer games. But when it was just the two of us, something about him had shifted. He wasn't really there anymore. The warmth in his eyes had been replaced by a kind of guardedness, like he was constantly carrying a secret so heavy it kept his shoulders hunched. And whenever I pressed him about where he went at night or who he was hanging around with, he'd snap. Drop it, Allie. You don't need to know everything about me. But I wanted to know. I needed to. Because every time he walked out the door after dinner, my chest filled with dread, like he was walking into something he wouldn't be able to escape. One Friday night, the phone rang while Mom was finishing up dishes and Dad was out late again. I picked it up without thinking. A man's voice, older, rough, asked, Ethan around? The tone sent chills down my spine. Who's calling? I stammered. The man chuckled, low and unsettling. Just tell him Mike's looking for him. Then the line went dead. When Ethan got home later, I asked him about it. He froze for just a fraction of a second before brushing it off. Wrong number, Allie. Forget it. But I couldn't forget it. It wasn't long after that when I stumbled across something in his room that confirmed my worst fears. He'd left his backpack on the floor, half-zipped. Normally, I would have respected his privacy, but that night my curiosity was louder than my guilt. I crouched down, tugging it open, and what I found made my blood run cold. Inside, buried beneath notebooks and crumpled papers, was a wad of cash held together with a rubber band. Next to it was a small, clear bag filled with tiny pills. My hands shook as I shoved everything back in and zipped it up. My heart pounded so loudly I was terrified he'd hear it from downstairs. I wanted to confront him right then, scream at him for lying, for dragging this poison into our home. But something stopped me, fear. Fear that if I said the wrong thing, if I exposed what I'd found, I'd lose him completely. The next morning, Ethan acted like nothing had happened. He tossed me a Pop-Tart on his way out the door, joking about how I was too skinny and needed sugar in my system. But when I looked at him, all I saw was the backpack and the pills. That's when I started to realize the truth. Ethan wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. And in the process, he was putting us both in danger. It all came crashing down one afternoon when I was walking home from school alone. A car I didn't recognize slowed to a crawl beside me. The window rolled down, and there sat one of the older boys I'd seen Ethan with before. The same hard eyes, the same cruel smirk. You're Ethan's sister, right? He asked. I froze, clutching my backpack strap. Yeah. He leaned across the seat, his voice low. Tell him he's late. And tell him Mike doesn't like to be kept waiting. Then the car sped off, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, too terrified to breathe. That night, when Ethan came home, I confronted him. My voice was shaking, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. Some guy stopped me today, I said, my eyes burning. He knew I was your sister. He told me to give you a message. What are you doing, Ethan? What are you involved in? His face went pale, then hardened into something I barely recognized. You talked to them? He snapped. I didn't talk. I just listened. He knew who I was, Ethan. He knew me. You're dragging me into this without even telling me what's going on. For a second, I thought he was going to yell. His hands balled into fists at his sides, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. But then, just as quickly, he deflated. He sank down onto the edge of his bed, burying his face in his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never wanted you mixed up in this. Tears pricked my eyes. Then why, Ethan? Why are you doing it? He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. The fear. The desperation. Because I don't have a choice. I didn't know what he meant. I wanted to push him, force him to explain, but he wouldn't. He just repeated the same thing over and over. I don't have a choice. I went to bed that night with a sick feeling in my stomach. For years, I had believed Ethan was the one keeping me safe, the one shielding me from the harshness of the world. But the truth was unraveling fast. He wasn't a shield. He was a storm. And sooner or later, that storm was going to tear through everything we knew. The storm I feared didn't just arrive, it tore through our lives like a tornado, ripping apart everything we thought was solid. It started on a Tuesday night. Mom was working late again, Dad had passed out on the couch after another long day, and Ethan was supposed to be studying at the library. I was curled up in my room, trying to focus on homework, when the sound of voices drifted in through my open window. At first, I thought it was just neighbors walking by. But the voices grew louder, harsher. I pushed the curtain aside and looked out. Ethan was standing in the driveway, arguing with two men I'd never seen before. They were older, scruffier, their posture tense like coiled springs. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "You owe us, kid. Don't play dumb, Ethan. We don't care about your excuses. You think this is a game?" My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream for Dad, but something inside me froze. If Dad came out, if Mom came home in the middle of this, what would happen? Ethan's voice rose. "I just need more time. Please." One of the men shoved him hard against the car. My breath caught in my throat. "Time's up," the man growled. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. You bring your family into this when you can't keep up." Family. That word made my blood run cold. I couldn't stay hidden. I threw the window open and yelled, "Leave him alone." My voice cracked, but it was enough to make them glance up. Their eyes landed on me. Smirks spread across their faces. "Cute sister," one of them sneered. "Shame if she got dragged into the mess you made." I slammed the window shut, heart hammering, and ran for the front door. But before I could burst outside, Ethan came in, slamming the door behind him, his chest heaving. "Allie, what were you thinking?" he snapped. "What am I thinking? What are you doing?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "They said you owe them. They threatened me, Ethan." "Me?" He flinched, his face crumbling for just a second before he grabbed my shoulders. "You don't understand. I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to keep you safe." "Safe?" My voice broke. "You're the reason they even know who I am. You promised you'd protect me, Ethan. You promised." That's when Mom walked in. She'd come home early, keys jingling, exhaustion etched on her face, only to stop dead at the sight of me crying and Ethan gripping my shoulders. "What's going on?" she demanded. Neither of us spoke. For the first time, Ethan didn't have a smooth lie ready on his tongue. His silence was the loudest confession. Mom's eyes darted between us, sharp and worried. "Ethan, what did you do?" And that was it. The dam broke. The shouting started, accusations flying. Mom searched his backpack, and this time, Ethan didn't stop her. She pulled out the wad of cash, the pills, the things I'd seen weeks before. Her face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're dealing." Ethan tried to explain about how it started small, how he never meant for it to spiral out of control, how he thought he could handle it. But none of it mattered, because the truth was in front of us. The truth was undeniable. Mom called Dad into the kitchen, and when he saw the evidence, he exploded. His voice thundered through the house, every word shaking the walls. "What the hell have you done, Ethan? Do you know what this means? Do you know what kind of danger you've put us in?" Ethan stood there, head bowed, shoulders slumped. For once, he wasn't pretending. He wasn't the confident, protective brother. He was just a scared kid who'd made choices too big for him to carry. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and tell him we'd figure it out together. But all I could think about were those men in the driveway, the way they looked at me, the way they said family. This wasn't just Ethan's problem anymore. It was mine. It was ours. That night turned into hours of fighting. Mom crying, Dad pacing, Ethan swearing he'd stop. that he'd make it right. But the words felt empty. Too many lies had been told already. When I finally crawled into bed, the house still humming with tension, I stared at the ceiling, numb. The image of Ethan, the boy who once shielded me on the playground, who once promised I'd always have him, was gone. In his place was someone I didn't know. Someone who had let secrets rot our family from the inside out. And the worst part? The story wasn't over. Because when people like the ones I saw in the driveway are involved, they don't just let go. Ethan's choices weren't just tearing him apart. They were about to destroy everything we had left. If I thought the night Mom found Ethan's stash was the worst it could get, I was wrong. That was just the spark. The explosion came later. For days after, our house felt like a battlefield. Dad yelled until his voice went hoarse. Mom cried in her room, and Ethan either stormed out or locked himself away. I walked around like a ghost, unable to escape the weight pressing on my chest. The silence between Ethan and me was unbearable. He didn't try to joke with me anymore. He didn't ruffle my hair or promise things would be okay. He avoided my eyes, and I avoided his, because looking at him only reminded me of how badly he'd broken everything. I wanted to believe he could change. I wanted to believe my brother, the boy who once saved me from bullies at the park, who once whispered that I'd always have him, was still in there somewhere. But the truth was staring me in the face. Ethan wasn't protecting me. He never really had. His secrets, his lies, his choices, they were the reason my world was crumbling. The final blow came one Friday night. It was late, almost midnight, when pounding on the front door jolted us awake. Dad stumbled down the hall, muttering, and Mom trailed behind him. I crept out of my room, my heart already pounding. Something told me this wasn't good. When Dad opened the door, 2 police officers stood there. Their expressions were grim. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller?" One of them asked. "We need to talk about your son, Ethan." My stomach dropped. The words blurred together after that: arrest, possession, distribution, caught behind the convenience store, enough evidence to press charges. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad swore under his breath. I just stood frozen on the stairs, gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles turned white. They'd taken Ethan in. The brother who swore he was my protector, the one who built his entire identity on being my shield, was sitting in a holding cell because of the very thing he claimed was under control. When I finally saw him at the station the next morning, it was like looking at a stranger. His hoodie was wrinkled, his hair a mess, his eyes red-rimmed. But what struck me most was the way he tried to smile when he saw me, like he thought he could still convince me he was okay. "Allie," he whispered through the glass, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this for you. I just wanted to make things better." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "You lied to me, Ethan. You lied to all of us. You said you were protecting me, but you're the reason I'm not safe anymore. You're the reason everything's falling apart." For a moment, he looked like he might break down. But then he straightened, the mask slipping back into place. "I'll fix it. I promise." But I couldn't believe him anymore. Not after all the promises he'd already broken. After that, everything changed. Mom barely spoke above a whisper. Dad threw himself into work just to avoid the shame of neighbors whispering about that Miller boy. And me? I walked through school halls with everyone staring, their voices hissing behind my back. "That's Ethan's sister. Her brother's a drug dealer. She's probably messed up too." Each word felt like a dagger. And no matter how much I wanted to scream that it wasn't me, that I wasn't the one who'd done it, it didn't matter. Ethan's shadow covered me everywhere I went. I stopped going to soccer. I stopped talking to friends. I stopped trusting people, because if my own brother, the person I believed in more than anyone, could betray me like this, then who else could? For months, I carried the weight of it all. The memory of those men in the driveway. The look on Mom's face when she found the pills. The way Dad's voice cracked when he admitted to a neighbor that yes, his son had been arrested. And most of all, The way Ethan had looked at me in the police station, still trying to play the role of my protector, even as the truth crumbled around us. That was when I finally understood something I had refused to see. Ethan wasn't my shield. He wasn't my savior. He was the reason everything fell apart. I lost my faith in family because of him. I lost my innocence because of him. And no matter how many times he says he's sorry, no matter how many times he swears he'll make it right, the scars are already there. People like to tell you that family is forever, that blood is thicker than water. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones who cut the deepest. And sometimes, the person you thought was your hero turns out to be the villain of your story. My brother always pretended to protect me from the world. But when I discovered the truth about what he had been hiding from our parents, I realized he was the reason my life fell apart. And that's something I'll carry with me forever.